Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. How to prevent and treat a low back that gives out early due to hyperextension on squats and deadlifts, and how long does the low back take to recover versus other muscles? You guys, we have to get away from this whole idea that there's an X amount of time that it takes a muscle to recover. Okay, a muscle recovers based upon your lifestyle factors, its work capacity, its individual recovery ability to clear waste products. A lot of that is how you've trained and built it to do that. And then we get down to other factors. Now, a lot of bodybuilding experts over many years have said the low back takes longer to recover. It's a point of contention. Here's what I would suggest to you. If your low back is weak on these exercises and it gives out, you need to build the work capacity in your low back. All right, I've said that before in videos, and it's something all of my clients know. Usually my new intakes on clients, one of the first things we do is start adding very large amounts of high rep volume for their low back. Okay? This is something I make every one of them do, even if they've done it in the past, because I want them to go through a phase of it. The low back, your erectors, are mostly connective tissue. Okay, there's not a lot of blood flow to that area. Therefore, it doesn't recover effectively or as quickly as you would like if you haven't trained it. You need to train it for more work capacity. That means you need to be doing some very, very high rep, high volume, hyperextensions, good mornings, things like that for your low back. All right, you need to be doing it. You need to be doing it. It will build your strength potential. It'll build your recovery potential. So if that area is giving out on you, it's because you haven't trained it adequately. You haven't trained it adequately. And it's an easy thing to fix. It's something that's easy to overlook. But, I mean, me personally, I take low back training very seriously. What do you guys seeing me do on most of my lower body days? Like 5 sets of 20 on good mornings. And I'm using weight that a lot of you out there probably can't do 10s with. It's light, but it's not ultra light. I do reverse hypers every day. Almost every day. All right, train your low back. You want a good squat and a good deadlift, and you want to do them with lower risk of pain, injury, things like that. You need to train your low back, and you need to train it with a lot of volume. Then these problems will go away. These recovery issues, oh, my low back's not recovered, I can't deadlift again, can't squat again, these problems will go away. All right, next question. Hi Jason, can I use reverse bands for dynamic effort lifts? In theory, the bar would still be heavier at the top of the range of motion than the bottom, but I never hear anyone talk about it. All right, interesting question. Now, I'm going to suggest that you really shouldn't do this. It would be very far from ideal. Now, I'm going to say that, and then of course someone will come back and say, well, actually, this expert, and maybe even like Louis Simmons might have even suggested you try it at some point. I doubt it, but it's possible. So someone's going to come in and say, well, you're wrong because this other person said that. And I'm going to say you need to look at basic physics and the way that bands work. All right, reverse bands are a different strength curve than chains or bands are. Okay, bands make sense. Normal bands for speed work, that makes sense. Why? You have overspeed eccentric at the top because of the band pulling down. Okay, it's pulling down on the weight, creating a faster eccentric at the top. You get stretch reflex at the bottom. It creates a different form of strength curve. Very beneficial when we think in terms of what we're trying to do with speed work and dynamic effort work. Chains aren't as pronounced in all of that. They're just adding and subtracting straight weight. They're the equivalent of adding weight plates on the way up. Okay? Now, people need to understand they're very, very different. They do not produce the same effect. Because we're dealing with energy and we're dealing with different force curves involved with the bands due to the stretching and the snapping. Whereas in chains, it's just purely mechanical. It's the best way to describe it. When you start doing a reverse band, you don't get an overspeed type effect. And in fact, if you were to drop very, very quickly against a reverse band, it could almost in some ways create a different response in slowing the eccentric. And if you were going really fast, it might help bounce you out of the bottom more instead of you getting a stretch reflex. Okay. I would argue that for what we're trying to do for speed work, that reverse bands would probably be the least favorable form of accommodating resistance. I would argue, in fact, you might actually be better just running straight weight at the appropriate percentages. Okay, because a lot of it does the opposite of what we want. It's producing the opposite effect of what we want. Okay, because it does a different thing with the eccentric. In fact, I think we could argue that the reverse bands may interfere to some extent with some of the eccentric effect we want. They're the easiest as far as the eccentric loading goes. And again, look at the way the tension is involved in it. And if you're doing it really fast, it could absolutely produce slightly in the opposite direction of what you want for the eccentric. I wouldn't do it. So we come back over to the point of what is it you're trying to get out of it. Okay. And I get it, for max effort work, because we're dealing with slower moving weights, the reverse bands in a lot of ways just creates a smooth transition. Like chains, but possibly smoother, particularly on the eccentric, because it can take a little bit of the eccentric loading out, and it might be easier to lift a heavier weight than even with chains in some cases. Right? But for speed work, absolutely not. I wouldn't advocate it. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it would be the way to go. Okay, because again, the way that it changes the eccentric, particularly if you're going super fast. Well, you need to remember on speed work, part of the benefit of going against bands is the overspeed eccentric. So you don't see people talking about it because it probably wouldn't be as effective, right? It probably wouldn't be as effective. I would say you'd be better off if you didn't have anything else to do. If you've got bands, just do band speed work. That's not an issue. Rotate between bands and raw. I would not say, well, let's do reverse bands. You'd be better off just using raw weight, in my opinion. All right, next question. Coach, during a heavy double conventional deadlift, my pec got extremely tense and felt like the weak link. I had some low back fatigue, but also the pec strain was kind of unusual. Thoughts? Well, I want you to think this through logically. We've got two pieces of important data here. Number one, you got a pec strain. Felt like you got a pec strain there. All right, the pecs aren't really a mover on the deadlift. Now, could they be a dynamic stabilizer? Sure. Could your pec get strained a little bit if you slipped into the wrong shoulder position? Right? Could you get a pec strain doing an above the knee rack pull? Possibly. You shouldn't be getting a pec strain on a deadlift, should you? You said a double. I've said a lot of times, and people will always laugh and say, well, this coach and this lifter does doubles and triples and all this all the time, super heavy. What is it I always say? Max lift should be singles. It should generally be singles. I agree with someone like Dave Tate, who said when people are lifting heavy with maximum lifts, he said as a coach in his decades of coaching, he has never seen any of his lifters injure themselves on a heavy 1-rep max lift, other than in competition. It's always doubles, always triples. You did it on a double. Why do you think that is? You think you got pulled into a really bad position? Because you do the first rep clean, and then when we start working with really heavy weights, the second or the third rep, it's a different exercise, right? We're pulling through a different bar path. We're getting loose. We're losing tightness. You think maybe your shoulders got slumped and pulled too far forward and pulled down, pulled on your pec? Because your technique changed on rep 2 and you're possibly using a weight that is above 90%, because a heavy double is probably above 90%. So you potentially did a rep above 90% with terrible form and a terrible bar path where you were loose. And it pulled you into an incorrect position. I'd be willing to bet that is the factor Be willing to bet that's what happened, right? The reason I don't have people do heavy doubles, the reason I don't have strong lifters do heavy triples, I'll have novices do heavy triple. Look, if you're a 200-pound bencher or a 275 squatter and you're a male, I'll have you do triples. I don't have my strong guys do doubles. We can do volume training in place of doubles. We do singles. And that's exactly why. You're pulling a muscle on a double, probably above 90%, that shouldn't even be that involved in the lift. Because you got loose, you got sloppy. We don't get loose and sloppy on heavy singles because we're prepared, we're focused. You have to focus on one rep. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.